You're listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show on WPPMLP 106.5 in the 215. And anywhere you can download a podcast, Found in Translation's text truth about politics and today's news headlines. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Let's welcome this week's co-host, leadership expert, activist, Adriana Rivera.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Ray. I appreciate it. I am so hype about this.
You know how, people talk about bucket lists now? Yeah. These are all the dream guests. So you're, number 7 now is off the list.
Oh, I appreciate
I'm
that.
so excited.
I'll take number 7.
Because J-Lo's 9, so you're in good company.
What?
So you'll be a better conversation. There's no question about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Adriana. Let people know where you're coming from, my friend, and let people know how they can engage in this conversation on the Found in Translation Talk Show.
Yeah, definitely. Well, coming from Philadelphia, born and raised, definitely. And we're here in the studios. You want to follow us on social media, also the podcast. You want to check out Facebook, Instagram. I'm really excited that you are on IG Live right now. You're on Facebook Live. You're on all the podcasts on iTunes, Radio Public, Spotify, Pandora. Look for Ray's Talk Show, Ray's Latino Talk, Rays. And support Ray and the foundation in this translation movement. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. I've already checked it out.
No question about it. Very prolific here.
I was sleeping on it, Ray.
I know you were sleeping on it. And we family. So you don't even know the level.
I know now.
And we're going to get into the DJ segment later.
All right.
But we're definitely, you're a big part of the family. Always have been Adriana. And I just want to say this, that, a little tip for y'all. If you download it and subscribe to the show on Radio Public, we get a kickback. So you can listen to it whatever you want. I just want you to listen to it. But if you have your choice, you have your druthers. That's a word, right? Druthers. Check it out on Radio Public. So, Adriana, excited to have you on here today. You have a lot of your fans watching. The AR tribe is, the hive is out.
The A Squad.
But, not everybody knows you, even though you're very popular. So why don't you introduce yourself? Let people know where you're coming from, what the perspective you're going to bring to this conversation today with the larger Found in Translation family listening and watching, not only over the country, as you saw from my summer tour on the West Coast, but all over the world watching and listening to the show. Let people know where you come from, Adriana.
All right. Well, I'm Adriana Rivera, born and raised. I went to Abington High School, a graduate of Temple University, also a graduate of Cabrini University, my master's in leadership and organization leadership.
Got a nephew there. Much respect to Marcus Collazo.
Yeah, go Cavaliers. Yes. You gotta give them the props. I also have worn many hats. I mean, professionally, I've worked in education, behavioral health. I've worked in administration. I've done everything from pump gas to be a director of something. So you name it, in the in-between, I've done it. I've worn many hats, been a part of a lot of organizations, especially around Latino issues, women's rights, LGBT rights. Currently serve as a commissioner for the governor, Latino Affairs, treasurer of NACOPRO, the Philadelphia chapter, which is coming back, so please stay tuned.
I mean, these are all the kind of affiliations you want. Strong Puerto Rican women, our strong Latino community here in Pennsylvania. Shout out to Luz Colon, your fearless executive director, a big part of our family. Yeah. And, we have a lot to discuss. Later on in the show, we got to talk impeachment updates. Someone's going down the river, and we can't make that river go any faster. Mm-hmm. We want to discuss, and I think it's really good timing, Adriana, to have the conversation around how we engage in intersectionality during Latinx Heritage Month. And you have some thoughts on that, and I think the perfect person to help bring that conversation to the community. You're also going to update us on what's hot in Pennsylvania with your leadership on the state level, which is really important. A lot of times it's hard for us to kind of focus on issues with that state lens, and you bring a lot of leadership to that. And then we're going to also discuss Adriana's real passion in our new segment, Behind the Turntables. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So, but first, when I asked Adriana to join me on the show today, I was so excited because, with all the issues that you could talk about, you said, you know what, I really want to talk about leadership. And I think that's so timely because at the end of the day, leadership matters so much. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes our community, people feel hopeless. And one of the messages I want to get out of this endeavor with the Found in Translation community is that it's not that it's hopeless, is that there's people that have positions of power that are taking crappy leadership, and there's some obvious examples of that in the modern political space. But the only question is, how do people like us that have values, that have care for others, that actually bring some positive ideas to the table, how do we have the confidence in ourselves to take on leadership? Because that's often the missing link. So why did you think, Adriana, as we're sitting here in the fall of 2019, it was so important to bring leadership to this conversation?
Well, I think it was important because we're actually ending a generation right now with the 2019-2020 coming up, we're now getting into a new decade. And with each decade means a new generation. And when you set professional goals for yourself, most of the time you're looking towards that ultimate what you want to be. And the majority of people want to be that CEO or that manager, whatever the passion is. So it's important to understand trends. And right now, as we're leaving a new generation going into a new one, there's certain trends that I feel anybody who wants to be in leadership power or who is and wants to take a step back and evaluate what is it that they're doing should follow. And I've broken it down into 5 areas.
So we're going to get to that, but I want to ask you a question on this. This is very timely, and this is something you and I share this passion for. So before we get into your trends, which I want to hear all about it, is that one of the things I'd like you to speak about before we get to a big part of the leadership piece. Mm-hmm. Before we get to the leadership piece, we got to talk about part of leadership is setting the proper expectations for yourself.
Yes.
Because most of our folks just shoot way too low. Mm-hmm. And then when you sort of give them a spark or give them an opening around the possibilities, they get scared off, they get intimidated, and then they start wondering, well, are my dreams too high? And so they start doubting themselves. Yes. So can you talk about that piece? Because so much of a big part of this, because this happens to a lot of our folks. I'm thinking about our friends that work in nonprofits and that want to do the right thing for people, right? Is that you set this goal for yourself, and then when you get there, you realize, wow, then you've climbed this mountain, and you look up and Mount Everest is behind you, because you realize, wow, that's it. Like there's so much more I can give, and then you go through this. Then you go through again this difficult process of trying to self-evaluate kind of where you're at in your career, especially midlife professionals. So how do we help our folks set the right expectations? Because so many of them are shooting too low.
Well, I think it's important to understand your value where you currently are. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we're called upon to do certain tasks above and beyond what is in our job expectation.
Especially Latinas.
Yeah.
Especially.
A lot of bosses like to run off of that and other miscellaneous tasks. But in reality, you're being asked to do these things and you're going above and beyond because you are worthy of it. And you're seen as that valuable person within that. So although it might not be verbally expressed to you, like, hey, thank you for being this. Because you are this, we're going to give you all of this responsibility.
Or you get pats on the back. But you're not getting the real rewards, which is either the promotion or the recognition or the management responsibility or the control of the budget. So, no, I think all that makes sense. So let's start with you've got 5 points here that help us define what a leadership is in 2019. Let's go with the first point, my friend.
All right. So the first one, as you... in all things, like I said, we just talked about we're ending a decade, going into a new one. Mm-hmm. It's important to understand that you will be, forget that, you will be the leader of several generations. And it's, so what that means is all in one room.
Hold on for a second. Yeah. Repeat that one again.
You will be the leader of several generations.
Shout out to my homie, Jeffrey Vargas, Boricua. He comes on the show. He's actually one of the national experts on intergenerational leadership. So next time you come on the show, we need the three of us to have this conversation. Definitely. So give us your perspective on that. That's very important.
Well, it's important because in one room, you're going to have a baby boomer with a millennial, with a Generation X and Y and Z and whatever generations there are, because there's a whole alphabet of it. It's important as a leader, though, to understand that you cannot lead in one way. Because you're going to have multiple personalities, because you're going to have multiple even working styles. How do you make the team work together and be productive while still trying to maintain that leadership role?
So, Adriana, that's a whole podcast of itself. Yeah, you should have one on that issue. Maybe you and Jeffrey could co-host it.
Yeah.
But one piece on that I wanted you to touch on, and it's not easy, and I've been there. Where I've had people not only with, it wasn't so much generational, that was part of it, but when I had my largest field operation in, a few years ago, is that you had real different learning styles, different different motivational triggers.
Yes.
So how do you do that in a way that doesn't show favoritism? Because some people can interpret that, well, you got to, and this happens in real life. Some people got to be a hard about with, right? You just got to be tough on them. That's just what they respond to. I call them like my little brothers that I used to manage. And then you have the intellectuals. You got to massage their philosophy, and you got to have them buy into. So anyway, my point is that you have to. How do you approach people differently, which is appropriate, But in that, you may have to show people more attention than others, and that may insinuate almost like favoritism. So how do you do that in a way that shows everyone you're treating people equally?
So it's important to showcase the strengths of everybody in a group. I do not believe in showing weakness in public. I believe in you take in one-on-one, work with a person. But it's important to identify what the strengths are in your team, because that's what you're going to showcase. If I know that you're, a baby boomer and you are the traditional, I'll take 24 to 73 hours to respond to a message, then I might not send something that needs to be direct to you. I'll send it to my millennial, understanding that they need an immediate response. And they'll get that for me, where I can have you work on other things in the back end to move the process along. And not make not make that public enough so that people see. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, don't be shady about it.
No.
But it's understanding the strengths of people and focusing on that and trying to minimize the weaknesses and not setting up people for failure.
Well, that's, and that one's really important, because I know there's been times in my career as a manager that out of a good place, like wanting to empower people, you put them in a position to fail, because you either put too many things on their plate, or, well, the only opportunity to advance is this opportunity, but that doesn't really fit their skill set.
Yes.
So that's very good advice. Adriana, what's your second piece of wisdom for us as it relates to sort of leadership in 2019?
Okay, leadership in 2019, and this is an important one for me, is to allow women to be leaders now. Welcome female leadership.
But La Mujer always ran the show. I tell people, I said, between my mom and my wife, I've had a Puerto Rican woman boss my whole life, and I did damn good. Yeah. So I don't know, but how, okay, so let me, in the context of this conversation, you say that, right?
Yes.
And so there's people that would say in response, well, in our community, aren't we doing that? I mean, if you look at the leadership class in our community, even in the corporate space, it has very strong Latina representation. So what are we not doing, or what could we be doing more to manifest what you're talking about?
Well, I know first and foremost is equal pay. That is a way to motivate
Adriana's got me snapping today. I'm back in like grad school here. Well, it's snapping.
Yeah, I mean, it's statistically shown that women do not make as much as men, even if they're more qualified for the position.
Even in organizations where Latinas have leadership, and even within quote unquote Latino organizations.
Right.
That's the truth.
Right. So we just have to welcome it more. We have to make it more equal, and we just have to understand that a title, actually a position, is about a qualification and an experience, not a gender. So that's my second point.
There you go. So, and we're listening to Adriana Rivera, a great friend of mine. I want to shout out, there's a crew of you guys and gals that I worked with when I was a young organizer. I was only like 4 or 5 years older than them. When I used to work for the U.S. Hispanic Leadership Institute, and I know Chrissy and Carlos and a lot of our friends were Elvita, a lot of our friends were part of those events, and I think that's where you and I connected years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been so great, Jackie. I think of all our great friends in that crowd, and thinking of, and seeing how y'all careers. Even though I was a mentor in a sense because I was the organizer, I wasn't much older. But I had a little more experience, and it was my job to kind of bring this group of people together. So I've been trying to have all of you on the show, the alumni of that. So great to have you on the show. So Adriana Rivera, besides being a longtime friend of mine and a student activist, is a leadership expert. So she's breaking down for us some of the trends we should be thinking about in 2019. I think before we get to your third point, I think to put this back to some of the political context is that one of the tragedies and fatal mistakes of a lot of voters when they decided to vote for Trump, knowing he wasn't having a sense of who he was this idea of, I think it was this stereotype and this misunderstanding of what leadership is, because how too many people are taught leadership, it's the apprentice thing. It's like being the strong, tough guy that that goes around yelling at everyone to do what they want them to do, and can pound their head on, fist on the table and fire you, and that's seen as strong, and it's very sort of egotistical. It's very self-centered. It's very top down, and obviously, at the worst of it, it's harmful. So I think that the one of the lessons I want people to get out of this conversation is, as we move forward in the political space or in our personal space and career space, we have to challenge what the stereotypes we were taught, like the Mad Men, the Mad Men, caricature of leadership. Yeah. And none of the things you're talking about fit into that. So obviously, there's a lot more inclusivity that has to happen, a lot more understanding. Mm-hmm. And I think from our cultural perspective, this idea that we work as Latinos as a unit. So what's good for the family is good for me. Yeah. And so we have to, this is one of the positive things we're bringing to this country is this sense of leadership, which is very servant leadership based and very inclusive. So you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. Ray, one thing about you and I is that we're right here.
Absolutely. So what's your third point you want to share with us about leadership in 2019?
So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here, as I know we got a lot to talk about. Okay. Third thing is it's time to pick up the pace, ironically enough. I was talking about millennials being more, what's that called? Immediate. They need the immediate attention. So we live in a time where everything is quick, instant gratification. We have cell phones now that work like computers. So as leaders, we need to understand and pick up the pace and continue moving things forward. My fourth point, if I can continue on, is to emphasize accountability. As leaders, previously, your boss would tell you to do something, it would go wrong, and you would take the blame for it. As leaders, you need to step back and say, no, that was my mistake. I apologize. I will take the accountability for that. That is something that I need to deal with. I led you the wrong way.
That's such a big thing. And again, it's not all about politics, but there's such an obvious example, right? Where throwing under the bus, nothing's ever this person's fault. And when that's someone's attitude, that's a huge red flag. Yes. Because I look at it and I go back to what sports taught me and what being the oldest sibling in my family. I'm the oldest of three boys. Is that, look, at the end of the day, do I have on some level is there a little higher expectation as the first one that got help with school and, I believe that's the truth because I feel there's sort of an extra responsibility as the oldest in that leadership cohort because I too have these two little brothers that I got to look out for, right? Not that they don't look out for me, but it's a different dynamic. In the same way in sports, the quarterback's not the only one responsible. But the quarterback's the one who makes the most money. So if you're the one who makes the most money, you're the one that gets the most attention, you're the one that gets coddled the most, you're the other one there's penalties if you get touched, you got to take more of the hit when it comes to accountability because those offensive linemen, those people that are sweating and busting their butt for you, they see how you have their back. Mm-hmm. So I think these are the kind of lessons on a personal level that I've shared, and I think it's very, very important. Give us, on the speed thing, give us an example of, to me, one of the things I'm frustrated by, just on like a life balance perspective, is I feel like I'm never off work because we're always online. Yeah. We're always, we're always a text away from somebody. Yeah. So how do you balance making sure people understand the speed that has to take place with making sure that they don't burn themselves out?
Okay. So I also talk about how to be better leaders, and I have one of my 7 points is that you don't need to just you need to create a schedule for yourself around what's important to you. So there's no just 9 to 5 for work. There shouldn't be. I'm not saying that, no, everybody's going to go to work and be like, well, I heard this thing, no 9 to 5. No, because if you want to go to see your kid's recital and it's at 10 o'clock in the morning, or if you want to go to a doctor's appointment, or, you want to have a little bit of extra lunch with a friend and you want to tune out, take that time to do it. It's okay. It's okay to back up and to schedule things. Now, don't lose sleep over it. Because you're right. We can keep working and working and working. But at some point, you got to learn. You have to learn when to step back and look at what you value. If you value time with your family and your friends, I like to take Mondays are usually my day where it's about me. If I'm off from work, I don't want to do anything else. I usually Sundays or Sunday. The Lord rested. I'm gonna rest.
That's right. Sunday. The Lord in football. That's what we do.
Yeah, for football. Go Eagles.
So let me ask you. This one I really struggle with, and I wanna direct this question before we go to our next break to the hustlers watching and listening to this because, and I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's one of these national sort of leadership coaches around these things. And so, his thing is nope, if you want something, you got to do what you got to do. And, hey, sleep's for losers kind of thing. You can sleep when you die. And so, look, this is a side hustle. You have side hustles. There's things we want to grow. And we're taught if you want to do that, do it on the side, build it up, right? But you got to have some time to rest and sleep. And so people that are really ambitious, that have and just have a lot of interest, right? You and I just like to do different things
I'm all
besides
over the place.
just work. Yeah. So what's your advice to them? Because the life balance thing for people that are ambitious and people like us and creative people is really challenging.
So that would be a case of making short-term goals. Establishing something that you can have done within a month or two, and making that your goal and continuing until that's complete before you continue trying to make it into a snowball. Set smaller goals and achieve those point by point.
Excellent. Adriana's going to take us out, and really excited. We'll get back to the last points later in the show, but I know we want to get some of the news headlines. So Adriana, take us out in a second.
All right. Yes. When we come back from break, Ray, we're going to get the news headlines. I'm going to ask you if Trump is ever going to be impeached, and more when we come back on Found in Translation Talk Show. Stay tuned. All right. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show on WPPM LP 106.5 FM in the 215. Listen to 106.5 FM in Philadelphia or anywhere at phillycam.com and on the TuneIn app. And you can download podcasts on Ray's Latino Talk podcast feed on iTunes, Radio Public, or anywhere you can download a podcast. That's welcome back. The host in Found in Translation. I do agree with this. The OG of the podcast, Ray Collazo.
There's no question about it. And if you wonder about that, look it up for yourselves. How many Latinos, specifically Latinos, were doing Latino-focused content more than 6.5 years ago was when this podcast started. We've been on WPPM LP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia for about a year, but the podcast being put out there. Thank you, Adriana, again for co-hosting. Bring a lot to the table. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this conversation. I want to let people know that Found in Translation is heading to campus next week. We will be doing our show live from Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey, during their Latino Heritage Month festivities. Business Hall, room 104. Anyone wants to roll to Rowan University? Next Thursday, October 17th. Show starts at 7 o'clock. I'll be joined by one of my regular contributors, Dionelli Reyes. Join us in Glassboro. You ever been to Rowan University, Adriana?
I have. I used to work in College Access. We took some students there to visit some tours. I've toured a lot of campuses. That one is definitely beautiful.
That one is blowing up. It's right off 55. Yeah. A lot of our Vineland people. It's right down the block. Matter of fact, shout out to Mayra Arroyo, who works as one of our great Latina leaders. She actually was a former school board member in Vineland, or city council, both. Elected official in the city of Vineland, and she works at Rowan, and she's the one that's bringing us to campus. So really excited to be joining us here. Going to be in Rowan University next week with Dionelli.
All right, awesome. Well, Ray, I definitely am interested and have to pick your brain on this whole impeachment situation. President Trump is now refusing to have the administration cooperate in any way with Congress's impeachment proceedings. That means no one should talk, no documents being provided, nothing. Feels like really mafioso, is Trump getting impeached, and what can we do to get this done already? God, I get so infuriated. This is the bottom line, and again, I wish more people saw it for what it is, because it really goes beyond ideology. It goes beyond our personal feelings about this administration's policies. Es una falta de respeto a este país. This is just a fundamental disrespect to what the country's about. And I wish the conversation, the honest conversation that we really should be having with other Americans that don't agree with our perspective on this world is really to ask them and really have them understand and really think about what they think this country is about. Mm-hmm. Because the country's, and this is no disrespect to our brothers and sisters that are part of our military or part of law enforcement. The country's not about us being, kowtowing to the army. That's other countries are like that, but that's not what our country's about. And our country's not about not questioning authority. Our country's not about dictators or one-person rule. This is a democracy. There's equal branches of government. There's laws. There's processes. How are you going to tell me that the U.S. Congress is going to subpoena you because of starting with evidence that you presented to us as an executive branch, and then you're going to refuse for not just you, anyone in your administration, including your Secretary of State, including your Attorney General, which is supposed to be the person that's the gatekeeper for our laws and our system. So I think the Democrats have to show some courage. Mm-hmm. To your point about speed,
They got to stop half-stepping. They're going to come back Tuesday from next week from the recess and need to get this done. We have plenty of evidence. They don't want to provide information. That, to me, is a sign of guilt. You can keep moving. There's plenty of evidence to impeach him. And if you look at the statistics, and I said this on the show last week, I can't even believe I'm saying it, I don't think it's impossible he can get convicted because basically the impeachment is when the House of Representatives indicts you, essentially.
Yeah, but the Senate has done something wrong.
But the Senate has to convict you. Most people think, that's all Republicans aren't going to do it. But when the 60% plus of the country think you should be impeached or at least have an investigation, that includes a lot of Republicans too. So I think there's a lot. This is very historic times, but we have to stop. This is blatantly about the respect we have for the nation.
Yeah.
And that needs to be addressed by the Democrats right now.
Yeah. I mean, I also would encourage the American people, if you don't know what the impeachment process is or how that comes about, research it. I mean, this is not something that just happens out of the air because people don't like each other. Our president has to have committed some type of crime in order for this to even be brought to Congress. And if it goes through Congress and after the investigation, we'll have articles. And then the Senate will have to vote on the articles whether or not that's enough to impeach him. At that point, we hope that there are, but the people need to understand the process and know that this is not, again, just something because, we don't like Trump right now. No, there's serious things happening here. There's misdemeanors, there's treason, there's bribery, there's so much.
That's right. And look, I mean, there's two things on that I wanted to share. Is that you're absolutely right. Look, I mean, the last Bush, who was the last Republican president, from an economic perspective, the reason we're in this situation with this debt is because of that, of the decisions that were made and the massive amount of money that were wasted on the approach we had with the Middle East with these wars.
Right.
And so, all that being said, there was nothing there inherently that deserved impeachment because that's an honest, to me, it's a bad way to approach things, but there wasn't anything inherently illegal or high crime about it, right? I mean, we could argue about you can debate around the torture issues and all that, but that aside. So that being said, you're absolutely right. This is about someone that literally has broken the law, broken our democratic ideals around what this country is about. And if you go more philosophically about it, this is when they take all these elected officials and even our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, and God love them, and the military, when they take their oaths of office, the judges, the elected officials, their thing is to defend the Constitution and defend the interests of our country. And every time my man makes a move, it's because the Russians told him to do it, the Turks told him to do it, the Saudis told him to do it. By the way, that's also showing incredibly weak leadership because at the end of the day, he's actually a very weak leader. All this talk of the tough
it's
stuff.
It's about agenda.
But what's the process you're doing to really make your decisions? But also that, there's something very fundamental about the fact that he is not sticking to the tenet of defending, him leading this country on behalf of us. It seems like it's for everyone else, whether it's the North Koreans. And by the way, all these people that have the worst interest for us in mind, not only as a democracy, but as an economy. Adriana, the other news topic I wanted to discuss with you is, and I didn't plan this, but discussing sort of the intersectionality conversations and how we discuss, because we have many identities in our community, but just the way it worked out, specifically, we had a lot of issues impacting the LGBTQ community in the news this week. The SCOTUS hearing on LGBT discrimination. I mean, the fact that in 2019 we're still debating whether or not it's legal to fire someone just because of their sexual orientation is incredible. Of course, Ellen DeGeneres being friends with the aforementioned former President Bush. Presidential candidate Joaquin Castro escorting Latinx LGBT refugees across the border seeking asylum. So a lot of issues coming up through an LGBT lens in our national headlines. Adriana, as we have conversations during Latino Heritage Month and we're trying to find ways to engage our friends in these intersectionality conversations, how do we incorporate the discussion of LGBT rights into these conversations as we discuss quote unquote Latino issues?
Well, I think it's first thing is to try to not make it so categorized. The more normal we talk about it, the better it will become. But let's talk about what's going on. So first things first, the Supreme Court. Right now, they're trying to rule on a law that will allow for employers to discriminate against an individual who is LGBT for a job or to be promoted. Mm-hmm. Basically, they're saying, if you're an LGBT and we don't like that, we can fire you. That is something that just because the equal marriage law came into effect, that didn't mean that everything else did.
That's right.
The only thing that is across the board is that LGBT people can marry across the board. That's it. But everything else is state to state. Right. So a lot of states still follow these laws of discrimination against LGBT, especially in the workplace, against adoption, against healthcare, against all those things. Pennsylvania is not even a state yet that is completely open to all of that yet, which but Governor Wolf is working on that. I will talk about that later. However, Philadelphia is very rich in protective laws for the LGBT community. So that's another thing in understanding local versus state versus federal government.
How have you found, and you work with the Latino community on a lot of different levels, how have you found success in bringing up those nuances within these issues? Because I'm glad you brought up the fact that these are issues that come up not just when we start a conversation about the LGBT community, but it's like workplace rights,
yes,
parenting rights. You know, that foster adoption piece. I get so heated about it because it's like I've never met a child that was upset they got adopted and loved by a gay couple. You know, like that doesn't exist. And there's so many sort of nuances that comes up in the immigration issues.
Yes, in
terms of, you know, when you're talking about family reunification, how this country and the states at times, you know, define what's a family, right? So how have you found success incorporating this conversation within our community and sort of moving the ball to at least let's just keep that issue, these issues top of mind?
So I've taken the educational approach. A lot of times when I'm sitting around a room, I do not shy away from bringing up the issues affecting me as a lesbian in the Latino community. You know, I grew up in a Catholic household. You know, it was very, a sin. It was very much a sin growing up in my family. You know, on my mom's side, but my dad's side was very open. So I had kind of a yin-yang effect of, you know, kind of losing one side of a family who raised me, but then gaining another side of a family that, you know, wasn't that much in my life, but is present day. So I just had to normalize it for me. I had to bring it to tables where I knew there were people who held these titles, again, leaders, and normalize it and make them see, hey, listen, there's this community, include us. It's so easy to just say, listen, we're going to put a sticker on the door with a pride flag, making this a safe space for people to come in and talk about whatever it is that they need to. Because at the end of the day, if you're providing a service, we're not coming there to talk to you about what we do in our bedroom. We're coming there for a service that you're providing. If you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, it shouldn't matter what's going on in our bedroom. So normalize it. But at the same time, pay attention to what our issues are. If you're doing a workforce conference, include in that conference rights for LGBT, considering that they could possibly go away in the workplace. Making a separate workshop or something to be inclusive in whatever it is of a service that you're providing, including the LGBT and include the LGBT community.
Awesome. So in this segment, I have to ask you about Ellen, what you think about this Ellen situation. So people didn't see us. Ellen DeGeneres, who we all love here, and what a great talent, and has done a lot for the Latino community, really Puerto Rico. I mean, Ellen's done a lot for the island with her advocacy. You know, she basically was hanging out with former President Bush at an NFL Cowboy game, even though she's a Saints fan. And then, you know, basically had to defend herself, felt like she had to address the issue and say, look, we can disagree. And there's a lot of interesting conversation that came out of that, right? It's almost like on some level, well, you're privileged, you're rich, you're white. You could hang out with these people, but you're not facing the brunt of what some of these policies day to day have impacted us. So, you know, I wanted to get your take on it. I'm struggling with how I feel about it at times because I like Ellen, and I think we do have to find a space for us to dialogue and not beat each other's throat. But at the same time, it's tough, especially in this modern time. So what's your thoughts on the situation?
I mean, first there's two things. I have to commend her first on reiterating the message that every day at the end of her show, she says, be kind to one another. And that includes people who do not agree with you, people who come from different backgrounds. So I'm not upset that she sat next to former president who was horrible, but by the way, Trump is making him seem so good.
Oh yeah,
so he should be sending.
I know
edible,
Trump's the best thing
he needs
for
to
his
be sending edible
for Bush's brand. You're right about that.
Yeah, Bush is like, thank you, Trump. So in a way, that kind of pushes them back from that. I commend her for sitting next to someone who does not agree with her, for showing what the common goal could be, which was just sitting together, watching this game. And second thing I commend her on is for cheering for the Packers.
That's right. That's helped us out. So, I want to read a quote from James Baldwin that on some level sums up a big part of my feelings on the issue. So there's a quote from James Baldwin, a uber famous African-American author and one of the most prominent gay African-Americans in modern history. Quote, "We can disagree and still love each other unless is the operative word here, my friends, your disagreement is rooted in my oppression, denial of my humanity, and my right to exist."
Amen.
Shout out to Kadita Kenner for sharing that on Facebook. Adriana, you're going to take us out?
Yes.
Get us ready for the third segment of the show.
All right. When we come back, I am going to break down the activism going on in Pennsylvania to have Latinos counted in 2020. So again, this is Adriana Rivera, and you are listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show, the hottest and longest running Latinx-led news talk podcast in the nation. Keep stacking truth.
And that's the truth.
All right, you are listening to the Found in Translation Talk Show on WPPM-LP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia. This episode is dedicated to the lives of Botham Jean, Joshua Brown, who we lost in tragic circumstances in Dallas, and best wishes to Andres Papo Albaladejo, who is in our prayers right now.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And, Botham Jean, of course, was the young man killed tragically by Amber Geiger. And that's a whole other conversation we could have around the forgiveness and grace that woman's been given. Joshua Brown, who, that whole situation just really smells. I mean, he was one of the witnesses that was a very reluctant witness because he felt he was going to be targeted. Now he's no longer with us. Andres Papa Albaladejo is one of my uncles, and he's in a tough place right now with his health. I saw him earlier today. A lot of people, particularly in Philadelphia, are very familiar with him. He's my wife's uncle, my brother, my youngest brother's father-in-law, grew up with us. Very close part of the family. So, Papo, we care about you, and you've got a lot of people that got your back in this conversation. So this show is dedicated to you, Bobby. Adriana, among your many titles, you're a commissioner for the Pennsylvania Governor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs. Share with the audience about the work y'all are doing on a state level to advocate for the Latino community.
Wow. So, first of all, I want to shout out any commissioners that are listening. It's a privilege to be within a group.
Your gang is watching. I know they're sharing and a lot of hearts.
I mean, I would hope, but they're busy. They're busy though. Being
it's Thursday night. It's either Netflix or A&R. Come on.
Well, either way, I'm privileged and honored to be amongst a group of between 25 and 30 individuals throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And if you don't understand how that works, there are commissioners nominated for different regions throughout different regions of the state to represent the whole state. And we come together, we talk about things around education, employment, jobs that pay, and any political issues. We've also been very involved with the Puerto Rico efforts, as well as the immigration issues that are happening with ICE, and anything and everything that comes to the table in specific areas. So, for example, on Saturday in the Poconos, we will have a Latino small business gala to showcase all the Latino small businesses around the state. We're looking forward to that. And then today, actually, I think there was just partnership done between the Department of Equality and Inclusion with GACLA. Okay. So definitely want to shout out Kirkwood. What is the last name? I forgot the first name, and Luce is going to get me for that. But so yeah, GACLA is definitely looking to expand, to bring the Latino voice to the forefront. Governor Wolf has been awesome in welcoming us and working with us, and we just continue with the commissioners to build awareness to the issues throughout the state. And work on them. Specifically, Hazleton. Shout out to Hazleton. There's a lot going on over there.
That's been a sort of a ground zero for immigrant activity over the years in our state. So one of the things that, and look, on a state level, you're dealing with a lot of issues. We have a very dynamic state approaching 1 million Latino. Well, I'm sure it's over 1 million unofficially by now.
It's over.
And what's really interesting about it is that it's gotten much more diverse over the years, not only in sort of a background. When we were youngins, it was very primarily only a Puerto Rican Latino population. It's got very much diverse, and it's also gotten diverse in geography. So we typically were located in Philadelphia and a handful of sort of mid-sized cities in the central part of the state. Now we're growing in the rural areas and some of these other pockets in the state, in the Northeast and the South, in the West and the Northwest. But one of the things that, unfortunately, states are having to take an extra effort in is the census. And so the long and short of it is that, the census is incredibly important. It happens every 10 years. And it really is how we not only count people, but how we divvy up federal resources. And because of our anticipation that this administration is going to have under-resourced this effort, states and other local government entities are having to take on the burden. So what is the state leadership doing with the GACLA network to promote the importance of Latinos participate in the census next year?
Well, we actually had a separate meeting and conference call together, speaking with Norman Bristol and those at the state level who will run this, to understand, first of all, starting with education. Again, one of my points, I think is the last one that I didn't get to talk about, was embracing continuing education.
That's right.
And that means training. That means just your knowledge around a specific topic doesn't have to result in a degree. So education around what is the census? Why is it important? Should you fill it out, and why should you even work for it? I mean, they pay pretty well. If you're
they don't pay bad,
yeah, they don't pay bad. You can knock on some doors, but as the Latino community, understanding, please fill it out, even if you're undocumented. It's safe. It's a way for the government to get numbers and understand who is living in what areas, and even being able to provide resources and funding.
And let me be straight up with people. This has not only state but national ramifications, because this is the bottom line: is that they don't want to count everybody. Even people with good intentions have never done a particularly great job in counting everybody in this country, because it's, whether it's homeless people or Spanish dominant people, immigrants, people in rural areas, whatever. Because if we get counted correctly, what's going to happen is that the states that we live in and diverse communities like Florida, Pennsylvania, Texas, California, Arizona, these other states are going to get more of the electoral votes in their states. They're going to get more congressional representation. They're going to get more federal resources. And these states that, are basically holding back the rest of the country because of this sort of exclusive, fearful thinking about people that look like you and I and love the way you and I love, that their power will dissipate if we just count everyone fairly. Yeah. Because of the demographics. So it's very important to understand there's a political agenda to this. And that's one of the reasons that they're scaring immigrants. Look, he's not one of the dirty secrets of this whole administration. He's not deporting more people than Obama did. He's not. But he's stoking a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. Why? Because he doesn't want our people to live their lives and participate in the process like the census.
Well, and, it's also a thing of, we already live in a time where we are diverse, so diverse, without even getting the census yet. Just look at Congress. We had 127 women in Congress right now.
That's right.
That's never happened before.
That's right.
The only Boricua, the youngest congresswoman ever voted is Boricua. We have Muslims. We have Native Americans. We have a Native American lesbian in Congress.
Sharice Davis.
Yes.
She's awesome.
Can't
She's
even imagine. Mind-blowing.
Absolutely.
So this is already
from
proven.
Kansas.
Yeah, and
awesome.
The women who've defeated the incumbents that were men in these Republican states, who've won, even if they're Democrat. We're already showing this trend. We just need these numbers to back it up.
That's right.
And it's important that everybody, go to your abuela's house, fill it out with her, fill it out for her. Go anybody, your neighbor, to church, whatever it is. Make sure you're talking about it. Make sure you're asking people, did you fill out the census? All right. So, Ray, we got to stack quick $20 and get your thoughts on presidential primary.
Always got to stack a 20 for Chrissy and the crew.
All right, so it looks like Warren seems to be nudging ahead. We all love Warren.
Poquito yeah, Warren's
I'm sorry, Lethal Bernie. He had a heart attack.
Well, we're going to talk about that. Much love to Bernie. Let me tell you, yeah. No, we'll talk about
that. And then obviously impeachment is taking over conversation. How do these new dynamics impact the race?
You know, I think there's a couple of things I wanted to share here with our found translation community. I think the first thing is that I think if the field's going to stay big, you know, even though there'll only be about 12 people on the debate stage next week, because Steyer and Gabbard have qualified for this debate. Much respect to Fernando Trevino, one of our local people. He's the number 2 he's the deputy political director for the Steyer campaign nationally. So respect to our homie Fernando on that. But
what's up, Fernando?
For sure. But I think because so many people perceive Biden as sort of a weak leader, front runner, that a lot of these people that shouldn't stay in the race are staying in because they feel like there's an opportunity. Ironically, a larger field helps Biden because it divvies up the race and it distracts people. I think the second thing is that Bernie's like in this election is marriage, because he's going to make the difference in sickness or health. He's going to make the difference because he could, right? If he stays in a race, does the illness help him? Does it make him a sympathetic figure? Wow, look how strong he is. Look how much he's fighting for us, even with the threat of death. His daughter-in-law passed away tragically. She was only in her 40s the other day, by the way. He had a real rough few weeks. Or does he have to step out because of the illness openly, but then he has this big crowd of people that he could throw support to Warren. He could hold his support. He could throw support to Harris. He could hold his support to somebody else. So Bernie is going to be a kingmaker in this mix, and he still is going to be a top contender, assuming he stays in a race. And I think the other part of it, which gets to my question to you, is that the media wants it to be a roller coaster, wants there to be drama, wants there to be
a novela,
a new thing. And on some level, the media sort of wants this Biden thing to go away because it could potentially bring up a new candidate. And the person that's best positioned himself to jump into that top tier is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, who I call him, Booker, Castro, and O'Rourke the boy band. And so there only is going to be one lead singer in the boy band. So right now it's Pete Buttigieg. So Yang's the one that they didn't let in the group, you know, the final cut. So to that, so I think Mayor Pete is going to be in a good position, but Biden still got to slip some more, and that's probably going to not be till a poor performance in Iowa. But let's see. But to that point, Adriana, I wanted to ask you, because Mayor Pete's an interesting figure in this race.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, obviously, his sexuality at the end of the day really isn't that important, because that's not the reason we should vote for one way or another. But I'm curious, is that something that, you know, the historic nature of his race, something that's interesting to the LGBT community? Is it something that comes up? Is it a factor at all? Because I feel like it's, it's something that we're not talking about that much.
Yeah, I mean, listen, whenever we find out somebody's gay, we're waving that flag all crazy. There's no, especially if there's somebody within that power. We're like doing our snaps.
That's what's up, yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, we do have to step back and understand what is it that he would change about the things of this country. Obviously, he's leading with changing all of the anti-LGBT things, and that's great. But what about everything else?
That's right.
Right now, it appears as though Warren has a more detailed plan as to what her first 100 days are, as opposed to he does. So I'm really hoping that he steps up and shows what it is that his plan of action is going to be. Because for me, it's great that he's a gay male, but at the same time, he's also who the LGBT community struggles within itself. We have layers. You know, a lot of our issues as minorities in the LGBT community is against against white men, gay white men, because they seem to be the privilege in our community. Mm-hmm. So at the same time, yes, he's a gay man by all means. Hey, let's wave that flag. But he's also this white guy that we, as black and brown people, and LGBT,
and doesn't have the track record, has not shown the track record. Not that he can't come back or show us.
That's what I'm saying. I need to see.
But he hasn't, and we've never gotten a good vibe, you know, from that whole South Bend situation. Doesn't get as much media attention, but we've never really heard a whole lot of black folks and Latinos, because they have a sizable Latino population, go out here publicly and co-sign for the guy.
Exactly.
So he's got some things to answer. Look, he's very young. And, you know, he there's a lot of experience that, you know, he just doesn't bring to the table on all these issues. But you're absolutely right. There's an opportunity. He's obviously very thoughtful. Look, I got to give the guy a lot of credit. Even though on this show, we're one of the first people that told you he was going to make some moves. But that's another story. But my point is that, you know, he stepped it up. He's the leader of the boy band. There's no question at this point. But he needs to listen. Because you can't be expected to know about all these issues. How could you have all the nuanced issues around Puerto Rico, for example?
Yes.
But the thing that I'm finding with the work that I do with my day job and with talking to some of these folks around the country is that a lot of these campaigns are willing to listen to us. So let's let them know. about what we care about and say Latinos aren't just about immigration. We care about the economics. We care about foreign affairs. It's our cousins and our brothers and sisters in the military, in the ROTC, in the reserves. So we have perspectives on those things as well. Adriana, we're not even going to go to a break because we only have a few more minutes.
All right.
I want to get behind the turntables. That is one of your passions. Tell people about. Let's talk. I'll get these paperwork out of the way. Let's talk about one of your passions. You're one of my favorite DJs.
Oh, thank you.
So tell me about, hey, how you got into it, and why has that been a passion that's continued in your adult life?
Well, ironically enough, I was a little girl running around Sylvie's nightclub back in the 80s.
Yes, and my dad was the DJ there, Ray Collazo.
And my dad was the manager. My godfather was the owner. Oh, so, I grew up in an environment of music. I mean, the record wall in that place was amazing. God. You kidding? Yeah. So in that, music just always remained around. My dad's a salsero. He became a DJ. Then in college, I became in charge of throwing our rugby parties because I played rugby. And so I just continued it on, and it became a hobby, and it became something that others enjoyed when I did. So
let me ask you a question. Yeah. Especially Latino DJs, Latina DJs, Latinx DJs have the hardest time. Especially with Puerto Rican crowds, because we want to hear everything. We want to hear disco, salsa, reggaeton, Latin trap, bachata. So give people advice if you're going to be trying to throw down with a Latin party. How do you service all these masters?
Well, first things first is to, obviously, if let's say it's a private gig, meet with your people. Find out what it is that they like. Get song lists from them. Understand how it is you're going to set up a playlist that would interest them, because it's not about you. Or if you're in a bar, pay attention to who's there. Pay attention to what they're dancing to. Pay attention to what they're singing to, listening to. If everybody's quiet,
so I'm not supposed to pay attention to the drunk girl that's yelling at me?
Absolutely not. Or what you want to hear. Yeah. This is not about you. It's about the crowd. True.
Yeah, there's some DJs that go through that phase.
They won't take requests. They won't.
No, because they're smarter than the room. I'm going to play this B-side of this song, an extended remix, because I know real music, and y'all, because then it's odd because they're well intentioned, but they end up with this antagonistic relationship with their audience.
I hate playing a lying song, but I'll put it on if I know that will start the party.
It's popping. What's popping nowadays? Because I know the Latin trap, the reggaeton, and all that. What's out there? I mean. And that's the thing about art in our community is even our older people get with that stuff.
Oh, yeah. You can't go wrong with Bad Bunny.
No doubt.
or Farruko.
I'll tell you if I start. So my wife's family, the Romans, here in Philly, they had this big family reunion. People came from Puerto Rico, and, most parents, all generations, but a lot of old heads. Or older heads, more mature heads. And my wife, somebody told DJ, play De Bote, the remix, and he was like, I don't got a clean version. They were like, play it.
Yeah, so what?
And that rocked the crowd. The viejitas were the ones jamming the most.
They were cursing loudest, right?
Hey, we all have had that moment where we just wanted to kick somebody out.
Yeah.
Adriana Rivera, this has been such a pleasure. Let people know where you can find you on social media, my friend.
Well, on Facebook, you can find me at my real name, because I know a lot of people know me as Andy, but my real name is Adriana Rivera. On Instagram, you can find me at Dapper724, or my leadership page, lead_talk.
Adriana Rivera, thank you so much for joining Found Translation. I think we're going to have to bring her back. Don't y'all think, family?
Let's go.
So appreciate you, Adriana.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, you too.